All right. All right, we're live. Welcome to this August 4th edition of EMBA, Marketing Management, Virtual Office Hours, hosted via Google Hangout. I'm hoping for that Google Hangout endorsement money, which hasn't come yet, but maybe it's on the way. Joined with three of our classmates, Balaji, Michael, and E, and perhaps DK will join us. Perhaps others will join us. So the goal here, guys, is to spend about an hour or so and just try to answer whatever questions you have. I have a couple of thoughts of things I could cover as well, but I'd like to see what questions you have and how I can help you, Mark Strat or otherwise. Round 2 decisions are coming up in about 24 hours or so. You have the results for round 1. Are there any questions about how to read any of the output that was generated? You guys good on that?
Yeah, we went through the report details. I think they're pretty clear.
Okay.
They kind of provide all the information that we need. And, I mean, it looks pretty exciting after the first round.
Well, good, good. I think some teams may be more excited than others, but one thing that struck me about the first round is how close all the teams were. Last year we had a bigger difference after the first round.
Okay.
Really, pulling up the chart right now, we have virtually less than $200 separating all these teams, and that can be easily made up in a single round. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some changes next round even in terms of the markets. Right now, S is the market leader, but things, if it's like most Mark Strat simulations, it will shift as time goes on.
Yeah, it's too early in the game, right?
Yeah, everyone's still in the game. The key thing here this round is to come familiar with these two new functions: the positioning for the advertising market leader and the like most Mark Strat simulations. Getting some feedback there from Yi.
It's too early in the game, right?
Yeah, everyone's still in the game. You can mute that here or something. This round is to you can hear function coming back, feedback, positioning for the advertising market leader, and the most Mark Strat simulations. Okay, guys.
Really right?
Yeah, let's start.
Well, it seemed to be
We get some feedback from you. Okay. Any questions about? So you seem to understand the research reports. I'd also encourage you to take a look at the tools tab. Let me just share that with you quickly.
Eric?
Yeah.
One thing that we find is sometimes you look like you have too much information to digest.
Sure.
So do you have any advice or suggestions what should be looking at for this specific round?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, one thing I would recommend is looking at these tools. And what's nice about the tools is that they will help you transform this data into more meaningful information. So we have things like these simple charts. You can see that's not coming up, I don't think. Let's see here. But you have these charts. It's really popping up this one screen. You have these regression estimations as well. And so I would say, first of all, take a look at the tools.
Okay.
There's two things. One is which reports to focus on. The second thing is which reports do you want to extract information from and use that in a decision type of tool. And so what's good about things like regressions, it can help you do some forecasting as well, right, of where things are going. There's a growth chart matrix as well. I'm sure you studied that in perhaps some other classes. In Mark Strat, that's not too meaningful. But you can take a look at that. I say the key thing is these regression estimations, either based on the MDS or the semantic scale. Let me just pull one up here. Let's see here. Just 1 minute. Yeah. And so if you see, I'll go back here. Let me turn this on, screen share. So I hit regression-based charts is what I hit. And I'm going to show you that. Screen share. And this is what comes out when you hit that, is this sort of thing. And these are the, hopefully everyone bought the MDS, otherwise you're getting a free look at this, which is fine. So these are ideal values on the 3 MDS dimensions, right? We talked about this before. Economy, performance, and convenience are the 3 dimensions that you get. And then we have the period 1, period 0 data, right? So you start to see a bit of a trend here, where economy starts to be getting lower, right? And lower economy means that people are less price sensitive, the customers are more likely to pay more. Performance is also decreasing. And then convenience is improving. It's becoming less negative. And from that, now you can't do regression because you don't have 3 data points. But from this, you can do some estimations. So if you hit ideal characteristic estimation graphs, you get something like this. And right now, it's not very meaningful because you only have 2 data points. So everything's on the line. But after next round, you can get some estimation here. And here, you have here these 2 dimensions. This would be economy, and this would be performance. And it would tell you where a segment would be, right? Where a segment would be. So you could see over time, you would see the trends. So that's a useful tool that you can use. Let me get out of screen share. And get back to your question is, in actuality, all of the data I think is useful to some extent because they do different things, right? So you have some reports talk about customer shopping behavior, which you need to understand where to put your commercial team. Some of the data is about, like I said, MDS, customers' preferences that are useful for positioning. Conjoint, useful for product development. So I think the key is to understand not only which of all the data you should focus on, but what data should influence which decisions. Right? And so if you think about all the decisions you have to make, one thing you could do is create a list. So here's all the decisions we have: pricing, promotion, sales force, production. And then here's the data that we use for each of these. Right? And then some of these you probably want to have some kind of formula, like for example for production. The only way to do that is through a formula, right? So you need to, you can't just look at the data of units produced, units sold, and inventory, and get an estimate of what production to do next round. Right? You need to actually do at least some very rudimentary algebraic equations, essentially. So I think that's the key, is to figure out for each decision who's making those decisions, and then what data are they using to inform those decisions. So I think, in my view, buy all the data, but use the right tool for the right job, if that makes sense.
Okay. And another question I have is, when we are, let's say, introducing a new product,
sure.
For example, Vodite, there is nothing existing already. Nobody, there is no such Vodite product in the market right now. So to come up with the characteristics of the product, yes, we got a good idea of what we really want to launch this product. But when it comes to pricing, we don't have any reference. What should be, how do we arrive at the pricing model while introducing the new product?
That's a good question. Well, I would say just one point of clarification. You don't introduce a product until you successfully R&D a product.
Well, yeah, okay, yes, that is correct.
The first step is R&D, then if you provide enough funding for that project, then you can introduce it in the next round.
Next, oh, I see. Okay, so this round, we only just design and build the product, and then we don't introduce it until we know the base cost during the next round.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no, as we approach the next round, right? So now we're in round 2. In round 2, we've enabled R&D, so you can do the R&D investments, but it will be one period until those investments are fully funded. So this next results that we run on tomorrow night, everybody will still have 2 brands. So there will still only be 10 brands total in the Sonite marketplace. But you can invest in R&D, and then the third round is when you can introduce a new brand. Usually they're Sonites. It could be a Vodite, but the Vodites are very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very unusual to see a Vodite introduced in the third round. It would mean you would have to probably fire a bunch of commercial team members and stop advertising everything. But they could appear in round 4. But to your question, there are actually some research reports.
Arik?
Yep.
Carrie wants to join in. Could you please pull her in?
Who wants to join?
Carrie McLean.
Do you know her email?
Yes. Let me see here. Find her email.
I have it. I can dig it up as well, but I thought you might have it.
Okay.
Do I need to dig it up? Oh, there's DK, I think.
Yeah, DK also just joined in.
Welcome, DK. We're looking for Carrie's email. She sent me an email. There it is. Okay.
It's CM.
Okay, I think I got it here. I just dug it up.
Okay.
Yeah. CM Clean 4.
Yes.
You guys have tough emails.
I mean, that was assigned by the school.
Yeah, mine's much easier compared to you guys. All right. So Carrie's invited. DK's here. Welcome, DK.
Hey, thank you. Finally, I made it.
Yeah, so we're live. We're being recorded, so don't say anything that you don't want presented in a court of law.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a question here about how to design a Vodite, what criteria to use to make that decision. And if you purchase them, there are 2 reports available right now before new Vodites are made. And that's a market forecast, which tell you about the size of the Vodite market, and the semantic scales, which would tell you at least selected customer preferences for the 3 segments: the innovators, early adopters, and the followers. And one of those characters is price. It's on a 7-point scale, so it's not actual price. But if you think about 1 to 7, where 1 is 0 and 7 is almost infinite, that will give you some indication, right? So if someone is at a 6 or above on price a segment, you can charge a pretty high price for that Vodite. So there is some data. You're not totally in the dark. Assuming you bought those reports, that will give you some criteria on how to design a Vodite. Carrie's here. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you.
We're live, so don't say anything incriminating.
Got it.
Okay. So we're here having a conversation. We have Balaji, DK, Michael, E involved here in the conversation. We're talking about some MarkStrat stuff.
Okay.
Are there other questions about MarkStrat?
Hey, Eric,
Yes.
for future periods, are there any specific metrics that you would look for if you were going to discontinue one of your brands?
That's a good question. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about. We're kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but assuming that you have a brand that at some point is not performing well, I guess there's two questions really there. One question is, how do you know if the brand's in trouble? And the second question is, what do you do about it? So let me address that first question of how do you know if a brand's in trouble? There's a couple of things that could happen. One scenario is the brand's actually, well, one scenario is that you have a brand that you've over-designed it. It has a really bad margin. You're making $15 a unit. You're not selling many, and it's not profitable to spend money advertising. Because advertising, pretty large fixed cost, and you can't make it up with the contribution margin per unit if you're not selling many of them. That's one scenario. So I would say, look at the margin, and if the margin is not covering the cost of, the commercial team allocated to that brand and the advertising allocated to that brand, that's a danger sign. Right? If you're spending more money selling and promoting it than you're making from it, it's not good. A second scenario can be where you have a brand that is simply badly positioned, where you're out in space and everyone else is closer to the target segment than you are. That's not a good situation. A third situation is when you have the brand may be okay, but you overestimated production. This happens a lot with Vodites. They get aggressive with the Vodites, and they find themselves with 50,000 units that they're holding in Vodites. And the problem there is not so much the carrying cost, the fact that the market is moving away from you, and that they'll just never sell this thing. You're so far away from what the market wants. So I think those are three common scenarios, and those are all danger signs. Another situation could be that you have there's some water running or something back at the ocean. Another situation is the brand's fine. You have, say, 5 good brands. And we have money to support 4 of them. That could happen as well, where you just overextend your resources. And you're spending so much money advertising all of these brands. So you can't even get into the middle. So you don't have the budget. Yeah. And all the money advertising. And it sounds really wild. I mean, it's coming from. Is it UK or Terry? Hi, Terry. Okay. Can you use your mic? You guys hear that feedback? Roger? Terry's on.
Yeah, I can hear you.
So this is feedback to... there it was. It was DK. Thank you, DK. Okay, turn it back on when you want to talk. Carrie is back. I think we solved it, Carrie. So keep in mind that it's great to make new products, but each product you make, as some of our Vodite, is like having a child, right? You have to clothe it, pay for its education, buy it a new car when it's 16, all those things. So brands, once you make a brand, you're going to spend millions of dollars supporting that brand over its life. So that's another scenario. So the question is, what do you do if you're in one of these situations? What I recommend in most cases is the best solution is just to cut your allocation to the brand. Reduce or eliminate your advertising, choke off the commercial team, move them to other brands. That usually works sufficiently well. Another solution would be to do a modification of the brand. If you're out in the wrong perceptual space, maybe you just need to change a couple of attributes and reposition the brand. I don't think there's many cases in which you actually want to withdraw the brand from the market. in my view, is best just to let it die on its own, because you'll pick up still some incremental sales. So that would be my recommendation. I don't know if it answers your question, Michael, but hopefully you won't be in that position for a little while anyway. Yeah. But I think the key to avoid that is to have a strategy where you're not producing too many brands. You don't need that many. If you make one new Vodite, two new Sonites, and then improve, modify your other products, that's a pretty full simulation. You don't need to introduce 5 brands. I mean, most teams that win have no more than 5 total brands. So hopefully you'll be in a situation where you have enough budget to support all of those brands.
But wouldn't you say, I mean, from what we've seen, modifying a brand is almost like launching a new brand or a new version of one of the brands. So isn't that, I mean, from what I've seen, unless you correct me, that's almost like launching in itself.
Kind of. I mean, there's a few key differences. One difference is when you're doing the R&D based on an existing brand, that R&D is a lot cheaper than doing R&D for a whole new product. So you're going to save money in terms of the development cost, first of all. Second of all, with a new brand, you have no brand awareness. You have to start from scratch, and when you move up that logit curve, right? So to spend, you know, 3, 4, 500,000 just to move the needle, just to get noticed. When you have a modification of existing brand, you have that awareness locked in already. Now that could be a bad thing if you're trying to reposition, you know, but usually that's a good thing. The other difference is that with an existing brand, one limitation of that is that if you modify it, you have to sell that inventory at a loss. So the best case to modify a brand is when you have fairly low inventory levels. And usually most modifications are small tweaks. You're, you know, raising the power or doing a cost reduction, trying to increase your margins. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of modifications. Now, like a relaunch where you're trying to cross from one quadrant to another, one segment to another, you have to do more dramatic modifications. And there, the question is, do you launch that as a new brand name or as an existing brand name? And the criteria there to consider is that you have that awareness, but the problem is that people know you for something else. So think about, like, if, for example, you know, light beer, which used to be positioned towards women, which is now positioned towards men, try to reposition itself towards women again, right? Miller Lite. That might be a tough sell today, right? Or if Secret antiperspirant try to position itself as an antiperspirant deodorant for men, that could be a tough sell, right? So that's really a judgment call into what to do in those situations. Usually, if you're crossing from, you know, one segment to a totally different one, I would recommend, you know, most cases, launching as a new brand. So I'm not sure that answers your question, but probably more than you wanted to know. Other questions?
Yes, I will ask. Go ahead, Lee. I'll follow you.
Okay, I follow up on that question for research, because when I look at research, I can only improve on a feature. I don't know how to. What's the difference between developing a new product and modifying on an existing product? Because there's no choice to do that. Or am I missing something?
No, there really is none. It's just, you know, it's a level of margins, right? It's just increments. So we do an R&D. You know, the R&D division doesn't know what you're going to do with the product, right? So the difference is that you know, there's a basis of knowledge in the firm. The firm knows how to do something, right? Samsung knows how to make flat screen LED TVs. And so if I say, well, make a thinner TV, that's not that hard, right? But if I say, you know, make a 3D printer, That's going to be pretty hard for Samsung to do because they don't do that kind of stuff. So the same thing in MarkStrat with R&D. So, for example, if you're keeping all the attributes the same, all the characteristics the same, but changing one of them a little bit, that's not too expensive, right? They know how to do that kind of stuff. But if you're changing every single characteristic, that's going to be more expensive. So there's this kind of base of learning. Where it comes in where it's a new brand or a modified brand, that comes not in R&D, but in the portfolio. So if you look under Decisions, the Decision tab, and I'll show you the screen share. Where that comes in is under this, let me just do a whole, yeah, where that comes in is under this brand portfolio. If you click on that, what you'll see, and I'm showing firm M, but they're all the same, nothing proprietary here, is that basically if you click on any of these, you will modify the brand. This will come up here, right? If you want to modify, you click here, then you select the base project, which was funded the prior round through R&D. It would change all the characteristics based on that project, right? Then you confirm it. That's all you do there. If you want to launch a new brand, you have to go here. Then you go to the whole thing, give it a name using the naming convention. This is just notes you take for your reference, remember what to do. And then you, again, select the base project that you're basing. So right now everybody has these two base projects because no one's done any R&D. But once you do some R&D that's been funded, you'll see these popping up here. They'll pop up as additional base projects. And then you would pick that. And so that's where the new brand versus a modified brand comes in as a brand portfolio. So that's really the marketing decision, right? R&D has done this stuff, and then you figure out, okay, what do I call it? How do I sell it? So that's what that is. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Then just one quick question. Then you're saying when we do a research project, we put it in a same number as it was before, but we can change one of the number. We're not putting, say, the feature was 14 before. If I put the feature of 1, it's not adding that 1 to 14. I have to actually put 15 in order for that research to be done.
Yeah, so you have to create a new R&D project, and then you put in whatever numbers you want. Right.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yep, makes sense.
But don't over-engineer it. I mean, don't just crank up the numbers just because you think more is better. Look at the research, preferably the conjoint results for that segment, and then also, think about the cost. How much did it cost you? Not only, and there's two costs here when you have a very highly engineered product: the cost of making it, then also the fixed base cost, which will be higher, which means reduced margins, right? So I always say, go as cheap as you can.
Right, and one of the other things I wanted to follow is there is a recommendation section in the in all the reports. Should we follow those or should we ignore them if they are? The recommendations do more research. I'm assuming that's we should follow those recommendations.
You want to point me to what you're talking about? Which report? You have a specific report?
On the companies, there's a feedback from your coach.
Which one? Oh, the coach?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let me go there. Yeah, that's a new thing, a new feature that was just added. So to be honest with you, I don't have a lot of experience with this. I've gotten as instructor something like this myself in the past in prior versions of MarkStrat. It's a little bit different format. But no, I think this is based on the same sort of metrics, but it's good. I mean, I think this is good feedback to get. I would look at this. So a lot of this stuff is simply descriptive, right? So it's not really, in my view, it's not really telling you what to do. It's telling you where things stand, right?
Right, but I'm saying that if it tells us, hey, you probably want to do some research, then my logical assumption is, then yeah, well, let's do some research against it. Or should I just say, well, the research is good, but we actually have something else in mind? I mean, is it?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
I guess what I'm trying to do is saying, are you going to look at it and say, well, you guys didn't follow the instruction, therefore the grade's going to be impacted, or?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Me? Oh, I don't care what you do. You can do whatever you want, right?
A+ all around.
No, my view is I mean, it's to tell you one quick story. So when I was a doctoral student at the University of Wisconsin, a fellow named Mike Rothschild, who was a department head, and Mike was an interesting guy. He was a actually competitive college swimmer at Stanford, and he was somebody who was kind of a laid-back, surfer dude, and he had joined Wisconsin as a young professor in the 1970s, like 1973, and it was an old established guard of very formal faculty members who came to the office every day, and they go out to lunch every day. And after about the first year, the department head pulled Mike in and said, Mike, I'm a bit worried about you because we don't see you in the office very much. You're not going to lunch with us. What's going on? And Mike Rothschild said, well, I thought that I was being judged on my outputs, not my inputs. Right? And that's how I kind of view, MarkStrat. I mean, the bottom line is, as Al Davis said, just win, baby, right? I mean, I'm looking at stock price index. How you got there doesn't really matter. Either you performed or you didn't. That's sort of the bottom line here. Now, when it comes to the report, you have to have some kind of storyline. But really, it's based on, and there is no one right answer, how you get to that bottom line, right? That makes sense? Yeah, so whatever you want to do is fine, There's no right answer, but the numbers, at least in MarkStrat, the numbers don't lie. There are, those are the results, and that's how performance is graded. We don't look at how hard people worked, how many hours they put in, whether they got along together. None of that matters. It just matters what the bottom line is for this portion of the grade, right? The performance portion. Other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the conjoint analysis, and
Sure.
I just want to make sure that I'm remembering exactly how you talked about it last week and what you're looking at in relation to the slope and such.
Yeah, do you want to pull that up?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. Let's see. Now, I'm assuming people bought the conjoint, otherwise they get a free peek. Anyone watching this Hangout? But that's okay. So let me go ahead and let's see here.
I guess you're welcome, guys.
Yeah. Actually, I pulled up the wrong study. I put a market forecast. Okay, let me go ahead and switch to the conjoint. Try this desktop screen share. Yeah, hopefully that's not too confusing. Is that too crazy? Okay. You guys see this okay? I'll make it bigger. Is that okay?
Yeah, just a little bigger.
Yeah, make it a little bigger. How's that?
That's much better.
Yeah, so here's the conjoint. And the conjoint is designed for each of the segments. So each segment has their own conjoint, and the people in each segment, these is the cumulative average of all the folks in each segment. And I think something like 150 are done per segment or something of that nature. So it's pretty robust. And there are, well, go ahead, Carrie, ask your question before I just...
So I guess in the last hangout, when you were talking about this, you were saying like looking at the slope basically, and like you would only want to go to a certain point before going too far, and like I just want to understand kind of that rationale and the way to approach the representation, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Okay, let's take explorers here, right? It doesn't matter which one we look at. It's all the same type of analysis. So in markstrat, the conjoint, there is no really x-axis. There is no x-axis. There's only a y-axis. And that's utilities, right? Or value. So the highest you can get is a utility of 1, which means that this is the most important and the highest level you can get for this attribute. And the 0 means that it has no utility, right? Mm-hmm. And then there are 4 attributes that are assessed: the design, display, power, and price. You don't know anything else about the other 2 attributes, just these. And then these are the levels that were assessed for each attribute. So design was assessed at level 3, 4, 5, and 6. So design goes from, I believe, 1 to 10. So we know nothing about what explorers think about design beyond 6 or below 3. So I point that out that it is possible that design of 9 could have a super high utility, right? We don't know because we didn't ask that. So we're assuming, right? So we're making some, some assumptions here that this is linear, but we only know it's sort of linear for these values. We know nothing before or afterwards, right? So the thing you should look at is, since utility is good, which values on each attribute have the highest utility, right? The second thing to look at is what is the slope of each line. If you have a flat slope like you have for design, it means that people are largely indifferent, that a design of a 3 will provide about the same utility as a design of a 6, right? You see that, Carrie?
Yeah, I do.
So both are developing, somewhere about 0.42, maybe a 0.44 utility. But creating a design of a 6 is much more expensive than making a design of a 3. So why would you make a design of a 6 for this segment, given that it doesn't really add much utility, and people probably won't pay for that? Now, in contrast with price, you see this very sharp slope, right? You see this, sharp apex, which means that people are very sensitive about price. These explorers, they're very price sensitive, and they're very, clear about what their ideal price is, which should be somewhere around 274. But again, bear in mind that these were the 4 values assessed. So when people were asked about their preferences, they were given, a conjoint presentation that had these numbers on it: 197, 274, 351, and 428. So we know nothing about what a price of 400 would be, right? The price of 400 may have a super high utility, but that would seem to be strange, right? Why would that pop up and pop down again, right? So again, we're assuming some, in this case, some interpolation. That we're assuming that utility falls off dramatically from 274 to 428. You see that?
Yep.
So any price above 274 becomes, increasingly less appealing to this segment. But again, we're making assumptions because we only know 3 data points here. So a price of 300 could be here. We don't know that, so we're assuming that.
Okay.
If it was me, I would, price closer to this 274 because anything above or below will get you much less utility. Right.
Can I ask?
So the sharp points. So basically, it's a sharp point. You want to hit it. If it's a dull point or a flat line, you don't need to worry about it too much. And then this this bar chart above will tell you how important each of these characteristics are. As you can see, by far and away, price is the most important. So no matter what you do with any of the rest of this stuff, if you don't get price right, people are not going to like your product very much. Right? And again, price is driven by the base cost, which is driven by how you engineer the product.
So for the price part, that's the is that the retail suggested price or actual price paid for the consumer? Because there's a difference, and one of them we can control, the other we couldn't.
Now, this is the price that people want to pay. So it's not the suggested, but the suggested retail price is pretty close to the actual payment price. It's not that far off usually. But this is not the price that you get from the retailer, right? This is the retail price, not the selling price. So if they look at explorers, explorers are wanting a price of $274. Right here, $274 is what they want. And go here again, $274. The average margin is about 65%. You take 274 times 0.65, which means probably the selling price will be about 178. If you want a $35 margin, which is low, you need to make it for 143 or less. Right. So in other words, a base cost of 143 will give you a small margin at a retail price of 274. Does that answer your question, Carrie?
It does. Thank you. That makes it much clearer. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, yeah.
If there is a discrepancy between conjoint, MDS, and regression, which value should we trust more?
I didn't get the question. You were
So,
fading out.
if we look at the conjoint analysis, when in trial, if we study the regression and the MDS first, if there is slight differences, which is more accurate for
It
us?
sounds like you're underwater. Maybe you want to type the question? I think there's something wrong with your mic.
Okay.
Oh, there, that's better.
So, if there is a discrepancy between conjoint regression and MDS, which one should we follow, or which one is more accurate to future predictions?
Good question. I said they're more accurate than inaccurate. They largely overlap. They tell largely the same story. I don't know if anyone's more accurate than the other. That's really hard to say.
Okay.
I would say that they're used for different things. So in my view, conjoint should be used for product development. You never want to use anything else for that. That's what it's designed for, right? Use the right tool for the right job.
Yeah.
MDS and semantic scales are used for positioning. And you don't need both of those. I think you want to pick one of them because they're very different types of reports. And it's just too confusing going back and forth. So I would decide early on, how are you doing positioning? Is it based on semantic scales or MDS? And then just keep using that report. And then you probably don't need to buy the other report. And so that's how I could look at MDS. Semantic scales are just used for positioning. Conjoint is just used for R&D. But to be honest with you, you could probably swap them, and you'd be 85% okay.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not going to make a difference in the final outcome. It's a pretty small difference.
Okay. And I had two more questions.
Yeah.
So in general, teams, how many products do they end up with? Is it like 4, 5, or more than that? And what would be the distribution of Sonite and Vodite in there?
Good teams or bad teams?
Winning teams.
Well, I'd say about 5 products.
Okay.
About 5. And most teams have 1 Vodite. Usually the teams with 2 Vodites are either really rich or really desperate. Right, one or the other.
Okay, and the last one would be if during any of the periods, if we are running short of, let's say, $2 million, is there a way to, like, let's say our team is planning to launch a Vodite in period 4, and looking at the revenues and COGS, we are running short of 2 million. Is there a way to get that 2 million from somewhere?
Sure. I mean, you could stop advertising your other brands. You could fire a bunch of commercial team members. You could stop buying research studies. You could put some money in this round, installment plan, and pay the rest the next round. Those are the options you have.
Okay.
You can also design a cheaper product. Do that.
Makes sense.
Sure.
No outside funding.
No, what you have is what you get. There are no loans.
Okay.
There are no sugar daddies in Mark Strat.
I have a production question. I think we've asked you this, but
Yeah, that's the hardest part of the game, production.
so the last question on the savings, the only way you save 15% is if you double the previous period's production. So if we produced 100,000, in the next period we would have to produce 200,000 to get the 15% savings.
You mean the learning?
Right,
So the learning cost reduction?
right.
That's usually talked about, at least in my MBA program, decades ago. We call it the experience curve. Have you guys talked about that yet? Probably in economics, talk about the experience curve. And the basic idea there, what economists say, is that every time you double production, so it's basically it's a exponential function, right? Every time you double production, you reduce your cost of production by 15 to 20%. We probably talked about it maybe in Hadi's class or Larry's class. I forget who teaches macro, who teaches micro. Usually that's part of microeconomics. And so the same thing in Mark Strat, they kind of follow that. So say you produce 100,000 units this round. If you produce 200,000 next round, then your cost of production should drop down by 15%.
And then does that become your new base cost, or do you have to continue to double?
No, I mean, that's your base cost. I mean, you still probably, now you can reduce it other ways, right? So you can do a cost reduction exercise. So you can say, basically, make this cheaper, right? So if you notice, but the water bottles today, they only have, you open the cap of a water bottle, the threads only go part of the way through. So I had a nephew-in-law who was working for a plastic company that he made those things, and they started cutting out micro bits of plastic, and it adds up over 10 million bottle caps. That's what you're doing. You're basically telling the R&D department, make this cheaper somehow. So that's probably an easier way, is simply do a cost reduction, R&D, and you can reduce that cost without having to produce any more. And that's actually something that very few firms do for some reason. Very few firms seem to want to do a cost reduction R&D, but it's one of the cheapest things you can do and has one of the biggest payoffs. So I don't know why people don't do that.
What?
The
How
cost,
do we do cost reduction R&D then if it's not, it's just a feature when I see R&D?
no, so what you do is, so what we can do is there should be a box you can click for cost reduction, minimum base cost. So all you do is you change the base cost. You keep all the features the same. You lower the base cost. And it would tell you, your report should tell you the minimum base cost for each product. And so if your minimum base cost is 150, you're at 170, you can do a cost reduction R&D, which means you do the R&D, you specify the base cost of 150, and keep everything else the same. Then you can run the online query, which will tell you the budget that you would need to make that.
But you lose one period in doing that, right?
Well, any R&D takes one period, yeah. But I mean, the experience curve takes one period too, right? At least, or not more. I mean, you're not going to be doubling production a lot because it's exponential, right? So it keeps going like this. So you might double a couple times, but that's about it. There's not enough rounds or not enough customers to. You're not going to double production every round. That doesn't happen. Other questions? Should I go through the positioning, or do you guys understand how to do that?
No, go ahead, please.
Okay, let me go ahead and do that. Then I'll do the let me quick R&D one more time, and we won't worry about the brand portfolio because you shouldn't touch brand portfolio until round 3. So don't touch brand portfolio at all this round. Save that for next round. So let me go ahead and let's see here. I'm just going to go into the marketing mix. So if you go to your decision box and click marketing mix, that's where I am now. Let me screen share. So what I did here was I went to the decision tab, and then I simply hit the marketing mix, and then I have these two brands, right? And everyone now has these two brands. And we have, I think, none of this I think is proprietary, I don't believe. And then I won't do it here because this will show more things I don't want to show anybody else. But you go to marketing mix here, and then the bottom, maybe I'll turn this off because I don't want anyone to see this, other teams. But click marketing mix. I'm sorry, click, sorry, never mind, don't do that, that was wrong. Click the brand. I don't know what I was thinking. My brain froze for a minute. Let me turn it back on. Click the brand, right? So doing a segmentation position, you have to click on the brand. So I'm going to click on most after I hide the screen. Okay. Screen share.
Feel free to update the correct numbers. We won't mind.
Okay. So I went to most. Then you click on the brand, you see the production, the price, the advertising, and then the segments. Then below that you have perceptual objectives. And then you have three options. You can either use no objectives, which I definitely don't recommend. Don't not do positioning, but then pick which report you're using. Are you using the semantic scales or the MDS? Then click that, and that will change appropriately. Then if you're using, say, MDS, for example, you pick which dimension you want, dimension 1 and dimension 2, and then you pick the level that you want. I recommend always having economy as your first dimension, or if you just pick one dimension, pick economy, because it's the most important by far. And then the second should be performance, if you have two. And then simply pick the number that aligns with the coordinates on the MDS map of where you think your target segment or segments will be, right? So if you think it's going to be minus 15 based on the MDS, so you would look at the MDS report, I would have it in front of me and have those numbers written down and just toggle them to the right number. And that's all you really need to do. Then you can do that for the next brand. And that's your positioning. That makes sense? So make sure that you do some positioning by picking their perceptual objectives. Don't do no positioning. That's not a good idea. So to do that, and I think we talked last time about how to do R&D. We talked a bit about that again today. And again, those are the two things. So think about everybody this round should be doing some positioning based on their segmentation strategy, because positioning follows segmentation. You want to position arguments that are appealing to the segments that you're trying to target. And then everyone hopefully was doing some type of R&D at a minimum, product modification R&D project, or a cost reduction R&D project, or maybe designing a new sonite. We have a lot of untapped segments in MarkStrat that there's no brands even close. So now's a great chance to try to own a segment by being the first mover to an untapped segment. You probably don't even need to be that close, since there's no one within miles of those segments. And possibly, for those risk takers out there, possibly investing in a Vodite. I'm not recommending it. I'm not saying don't do it. But it is a high-risk, high-return strategy at this point. And bear in mind that any dollars you spend, partially spent on R&D projects. So say you want to do a Vodite, and it might cost $7 million, but you put in $3 million this round. The good news is that money stays there, and then you can finish it next round. But the bad news is that money stays there too, right? And so if you made a mistake and you said, oops, we designed the wrong vodite, you just lost $3 million. So if you're going to do that, be very sure that you're making the vodite that you think will sell. Right? Don't just make a vodite just to have a vodite.
Can you elaborate on that? So you mentioned like if the vodite is costing you, let's say $7 million, and you have $3 million in this period.
Yeah.
You are short of $4 million. You cannot run an analysis, right? You just keep that cash for next.
No, you can do an R&D project for. So here's one strategy. You can do an R&D project for as low as $100,000. So one strategy is you want to make a vodite, but you have no idea how much it would cost. So you put in the R&D when you have that budget box. You create your vodite specifications. The budget you put in would be $100,000, right? And then the next round, it would tell you how much more you need to fund it. And then if you change your mind, you've only lost $100,000. But that's there in the bank. Then you pay, $6.9 million to get it funded. Well, that's another strategy. Or you can pay half. You can pay $3.5 million or $3 million, and that sits there. That doesn't go away. Then you can finish it the next round. But if you're uncertain, I would say put a little bit of money in and test it out and reduce your risk. Are there other questions? Yeah.
Arik, I have a question. Arik?
Go ahead.
This online query where you can get an estimate of how much R&D effort is going to cost.
Yeah.
So if we do that, will we have the answer before you do the submit? When we do online query, will we have it immediately?
Yeah, get it immediately.
Okay.
Right away. Bear in mind that's an estimate, so it could be off.
Okay.
Yeah, usually it's estimating on the high end. So it says 7 million is probably like 6.5.
Mm-hmm.
But I always recommend not trying to push it. If it says 7 million, I would go 7 million.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and you can do 5 online queries every round.
Okay. So what you're suggesting is if you go for an online query, it comes up with a slightly higher one, so we plan for slightly lower than what it recommends?
No, I'm saying is I would go with it, whatever it recommends.
Oh, I see.
Unless you don't like what it recommends, then I would change the numbers, right? So when this is too high, let me reduce the design or reduce the, the power,
Mm-hmm.
or make it a smaller screen size, and then run it again to see what that number comes up with. But in my view, it's risky to, try to guess how much it's over by.
Okay.
It's not worth the few $100,000 you might save.
Okay. Now going back to the earlier comment that you made, you kind of don't recommend launching a vodite product at this stage? Is that what you said?
Oh, well, you can't launch a vodite because you have to design a vodite, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, what I meant was design, yeah.
Yeah, it's, I hate to give too many recommendations, then if people do it and it doesn't work, they blame me. But
how many times have you played this game?
What's that?
How many times have you played the simulation yourself?
As a player myself, once in my MBA program back in 1988, we finished in last place.
Yeah, I told us that in the class.
Once a bunch of us, when I was at Wisconsin as a doctoral student, a bunch of us doctoral students played, and we were individuals, not teams, and I won that one.
Okay.
That was back in I think 95. But I've seen a lot of other people play.
Okay.
But my recommendation would be that you approach the vodite with I don't want to say caution, but with a high degree of carefulness and deliberateness. That you make sure that as best you can that this is not going to fail. So this is something that should be considered very seriously and checking every possible scenario of what could go wrong.
Okay.
So don't just launch it as an experiment or exploratory mode. You may want to, again, put in a token amount of money to create one, $100,000 or so. You can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a bad idea to put some money into to partially fund one. The problem, I think, really comes in is that at this point, given how low the budgets are, everyone has about $7.5 million for a total budget. That's everything, right? Entire budget, advertising, commercial team, research. That you don't have enough money to make a really good Vodite.
Mm.
And making a really cheap one is not always the best option. You don't need a great one.
But the first Vodite that you plan must be the one that attracts innovators, right? So you get into the market with that product.
Yeah, that would work if you're the only firm in the industry, right?
Mm, right.
But what comes in is that if you do that, and then someone else comes in with a slightly better product, they can end up with 90% of the market, and you have 0 or 10%.
Mm.
So that's the risk, is you don't know, or it's hard to tell sometimes what other teams are doing. So that's where it goes wrong. Now, again, if you're the only one, but also, too, even if you're the only one and someone comes out next round with something much better, you only get that 1-year advantage, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it's not a long-term strategy at this point. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but just some things to think about.
Okay.
But putting some money in a Vodite is not a bad idea. I just wouldn't put a lot into it at this point. So. Other questions?
What, I just missed your last statement. You say put some money into Vodite is not necessarily a great idea.
I think it's okay, some, but not a lot. I mean, not a lot. I mean, I wouldn't, at this point, I wouldn't stop advertising or hiring salespeople. So I say, you do all your advertising, you hire your salespeople, buy your research reports, you got extra $1 million left, and you want to put some into Vodite, that's probably okay. I wouldn't start saying we're going to cut back everything and be the first mover with the first Vodite possible and sacrifice the sonite market. I think that's risky. Just my personal opinion. I think getting older, I'm becoming more conservative, less risk-taking. But I said something different 20 years ago. So, other questions? Are we good?
Yes. One more. How can things change in the last 2 periods? What can be a winning strategy or a losing strategy from competitive standpoint?
The last 2 periods?
So I think like last time when we were talking, the previous year our seniors came in and they mentioned they were lagging, and in the last 2 periods they were able to pull the win off. So what kind of things can happen in last 2 periods, and what can be the implications?
Yeah, I think probably the time to talk about that is as we get closer to that time frame. We can ask that question again. And each industry is different. I mean, if that leading firm is 1,000 stock points above everybody else, the only thing you can hope for is that they make a mistake. If they're within 100, there's lots of things you can do, right? Really the key question is, if you're a challenger, is to what degree do you want to employ a competitive focused strategy and try to bring the leading firm down, right? Or is it a more customer focused strategy? So you can do some things to target that firm in particular, but then sometimes what happens is you focus on that firm, another firm from behind comes up and passes you both, right? So it all depends on where things stand and how close the firms are. And we won't know. I mean, if it's this close in round 6, anything could change it any reason. Usually what happens at that point of the game, the sonite market usually is slowing down, the Vodite is growing, and it's shifting towards a lower cost structure follower-dominated, market. So usually, then a Vodite that is more focused on the followers at that point might gain some ground. But it all depends. That the Vodite market, how the development depends on when the first Vodites launch. So the first Vodites launched around round 6. There won't be any followers. They'll never exist, or they'll be very small.
Yep.
Yeah. Other questions? I think Carrie left us already. Are you guys good with everything? You ready for your decisions tomorrow?
Yes, I think.
Good luck. Yeah, again, this is a round. Since there's no new products, that things won't move too much. There'll be bigger variants, of course, in the last round, but really it's round 3. So the most critical thing really is how each team thinks about and does their R&D. That's the most important decision to make in this round is what is R&D, and again the options are Vodite, new Vodite, design a new Sonite, and modify an existing Sonite, and you can do all of those things or none of those things. I recommend doing some of those things.
Okay.
Maybe not all, but some of those things would be good. Don't not do any R&D. Do something. And that's the funnest part of the game, in my view, is the whole R&D aspect. Okay, guys. Well, I probably should sign off. I'll post this on our. I'll try to post on the Compass site. Hopefully, it will work. I think it worked last time. And I'll see you guys in about 36 hours.
Yes.
Something like that. I need to work on my presentation slides.
Okay, looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks for the time.
Happy mark threading.
Bye-bye.